Tonight, President Trump's first major state official visit of his second term, receiving a lavish welcome in Saudi Arabia as he begins his Middle East visit, and as he defends the administration's plan to accept a luxury jet from Qatar.
I think it's a great gesture from Qatar. I appreciate it very much.
Plus, tackling America's excessive prescription drug prices. President Trump signs an executive order that aims to put American drug prices more in line with other countries.
And the final known living American hostage released by Hamas, as the families of others still in captivity continue to hold out hope.
All this and more tonight on Faith Nation.
A second term, a second chance on the world stage. Welcome to Faith Nation. I'm John Jessup.
And good evening in Washington. I'm Jenna Browder. President Trump kicked off his first major international trip of his second term with stops in Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the United Arab Emirates. On the agenda, economic wheeling and dealing as the president meets with world leaders and investors across the region.
CBN White House correspondent Kelly Wright is following all of the developments of the president's trip.
If there is a theme to the president's trip to the Middle East, it is one of seizing this moment in time, a moment in history to seek peace and prosperity. The president stating that he wants the region to be seen not as a land of chaos, violence, and death, but to become a region that is capable of bringing a hope and future for generations to come. A color guard mounted on Arabian horses escorted President Trump's car to the royal palace in Riyadh. All of the pomp and circumstance was part of the warm welcome he received from Saudi Prince Mohammed bin Salman. The two leaders expressed their strong support for each other. President and Prince agreeing to sign a trade deal worth $600 billion. The White House states the agreement is designed to strengthen the strategic partnership in energy, technology, critical minerals, and defense. President Trump touts the deal as being historic and transformative.
With this historic state visit, we celebrate more than 80 years of close partnership between the United States and the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Ever since President Franklin Roosevelt met with King Solomon's father, King Abdul Aziz, aboard the USS Quincy in 1945, the U.S.-Saudi relationship has been a bedrock of security and prosperity.
The president expanded his speech to focus on Iran, urging its regime to pursue a new and better path towards peace instead of chaos and conflict. He said Iran must be stopped from destabilizing the region.
Our task is to unify against the few agents of chaos and terror that are left and that are holding hostage the dreams of millions and millions of great people. The biggest and most destructive of these forces is the regime in Iran, which has caused unthinkable suffering in Syria, Lebanon, Gaza, Iraq, Yemen, and beyond.
Adding to his foreign policy vision for containing Iran, President Trump announced, based on talks he shared with the Crown Prince and Gulf leaders, that he would start taking steps to help the new government of Syria, which deposed its former leader, Bashar al-Assad.
In Syria, they've had their share of travesty, war, killing, many years. That's why my administration has already taken the first steps toward restoring normal relations between the United States and Syria for the first time in more than a decade.
The president's next stop on his three-nation tour to the Middle East is Qatar. Before embarking on his Middle East trip, the country offered the president a new plane as a gift to replace Air Force One. The president accepted that gift, which he states will be used for his presidential library. That has met criticism from Democrats and even some Republicans who believe that Congress should decide if the president should accept such a gift from a foreign country. Back to you.
All right, thank you, Kelly. Well, Mr. Trump left for that trip on the heels of a major diplomatic announcement. The person believed to be the sole living American hostage in Gaza is now free. You can see here the emotional reunion between Idan Alexander and his family Monday after 19 months in captivity. Alexander, a dual citizen who grew up in New Jersey, was serving in the Israeli military when he was captured during the October 2023 attacks. That deal reportedly came through back-channel negotiations between the United States, Qatar, and Hamas. The president praised the release, calling it part of a good faith step to return all living hostages and remains to their loved ones. Around 58 hostages remain in Hamas captivity.
And one of those still being held is Eviatar David. His brother Eli joins us now in studio. Eli, welcome. Good to see you again. So I know we were talking a little bit off air. The release of this man gives hope for you and others who still have relatives in captivity.
It does. It does. Seeing Idan and his family, we became like a very big family on October 7th. And seeing Idan comes back to his parents and to his brother and sister, it really kicks a lot of hope into the system. And I really believe that it's the start of it's the beginning of the end. And soon enough, we'll see all the hostages come back
and hopefully a swell of momentum is what you were saying as well. When we last spoke in February, Hamas had released a video of your brother showing signs of life.
Yes.
Have you heard anything since? Give us an update on your brother.
So on last February, almost 3 months ago, we did see a veteran guy. We saw them alive. Guy was kidnapped alongside Eviatar. They were kidnapped together from the Nova Festival. And we saw them while they were forced to watch as their friends being released. They were like 30 feet from stage where the hostages stood. And then they were forced to beg for their lives in front of the camera. And we know that they were sent back into the same dungeon they were kept in. We know that they are being preserved alive in this very bad place, underground, with a very small amount of food and water. It's a tunnel, 3 feet, 3.5 feet on 30 feet. They do their needs right next where they sleep. And they are completely disconnected from the outside world, so they have no idea. And we saw that the abuse is not only physical, but also emotional and mental. So it's very bad, and every second there is eternity for the hostages. And we are speaking about saving lives right now.
As you were just saying, there's hope with Idan Alexander's release. We're all hopeful as well. But can you remind us, for those who aren't familiar with your brother's story, Eviatar, he's 24, as we were talking right before the show. You're his older brother. He was at the Nova Music Festival.
That's right.
Can you describe who he was, what his life was before that festival?
Of course. Eviatar is the kindest soul I know. He's an amazing son to my parents. I learned from him how to be a good son to my parents. He's an amazing brother to my younger sister, Yaela. And he's also a brilliant guitar player. We play music every week together. I play the piano and he plays the guitar. It's a tradition of us every Friday. And we sing. And I really miss his voice and I really miss his smile. And before I go to sleep, I imagine how he comes back and plugs his guitar and play music, and I hear his voice very clear in my mind. And when I hear it again, when I see him hugs my parents, I know that he's home. And that's what I'm manifesting, and that's what I'm waiting for. And I just want to hug him. I just miss him. And I know how much it's important also for the Israeli people to see the hostages come back. And I know how much it is important for the American people to see the hostages come back.
Yeah. In just the few seconds we have left, what is your message for our viewers at home as we hope and pray that these remaining hostages will be released?
I believe President Trump was sent by God to release the hostages, to end the misery in the Middle East, in the region. I really believe so, and I think Mr. Witkoff is doing his job right now, his role in that effort. And I think we are very close to it, and we just need to keep pushing that the hostages will be top priority, to keep them visible and make them released as soon as possible, because they are dying, they are decaying, and we must save them as soon as possible.
Eli, David, we are so grateful to have you in studio, and our thoughts and our prayers with you as we continue to just hope for your brother's return.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Eli,
you.
thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
Well, now to the economy. Some good news for consumers. Inflation has cooled to its lowest level since 2021. April's inflation rate beat expectations, slowing to 2.3%. Meanwhile, egg prices have dropped to the lowest point since October 2024. According to the Consumer Price Index, last month's average was about $5.12 a dozen, though that's still more than twice as much as the same time last year.
Joining us now is Richard Stern, director of the Center for Federal Budget at the Heritage Foundation. Richard, welcome. So, inflation cooling, egg prices falling. Does this signal the economy is headed in the right direction? And how did President Trump's tariffs factor in?
Oh, absolutely. This is all in the right direction. Thank you for having me on about it. Look, this is the next month yet in a row since Trump's taken office where prices are coming down. We have to remember that we struggled under 4 years of rising prices under Biden because of reckless government spending and reckless money printing at the Fed. So Trump has put pressure on the Fed to stop printing money. And of course, we've seen he cuts the government spending because of DOGE and other things. And those are what's reducing those price pressures. But also deregulation, especially on energy, is allowing energy prices to come down. Of course, energy is such a bedrock in absolutely everything. Now, I'll be the first to admit that if tariffs stay permanently, those will rise prices. But at the same time, Trump is using those tariffs as temporary negotiating tools. And so we probably won't see price increases as long as he resolves those negotiations quickly.
You talked about some of the positivity. Speaking of those tariffs, though, The Guardian released an exclusive poll with Harris that tracks economic anxiety. It shows 6 in 10 Americans cite affordability and uncertainty as reasons for reconsidering major life events, and that includes buying a home, maybe even getting married or even having children. Richard, is that potentially a warning sign of things to come and maybe derailing what you were just talking about, the positive signs with deregulation?
Definitely. But you know what I will say is that's really a decades-long thing. Look, if you go back and look at data comparing average incomes to average home prices over the last 40, 50 years, what you'll see is homes have become increasingly more expensive. In fact, just in the last few years since COVID and the inflation under Biden, it now costs 3 times as much to pay for the mortgage, the first year's mortgage on a brand new home. So I think people are feeling that. But at the end of the day, the government consumes a quarter of every dollar we earn. Regulations cost the average manufacturer, for example, almost $30,000 a year per worker. But this was a decades-long crush. And so Americans are feeling that. But I think a lot of what Trump is doing here is the first attempt really in decades to get out from under that and get back to an economy where you can keep the dollars you earn and have opportunity.
Yeah. So the markets initially reacted positively to the 90-day agreement between China and the United States to lower tariffs. But today, President Xi Jinping told Latin American leaders that China was ready to work together to block bullying and protectionism. Richard, how long do you anticipate these negotiations to go?
Well, I think politicians will say a lot of things, as we all know. But, you know, look, I think the fact that just, 2 days ago, we were at 145% and 125 at tariffs, and now we're at 30 and 10 from both the U.S. and China, shows you that they're already, I think, pretty close to getting rid of the tariffs. So, look, I think we might have another month, maybe even 2, of a lot of these negotiations between China and the U.S., but my guess is you're going to see the tariffs come way down, if not be gone, at some point here. But I will say, look, there are individual industries where China is stealing IP, dumping products in the U.S. markets.
Right.
Those areas might continue to have tariffs for forever until the Chinese stop their practices.
All right, we're going to have to leave it right there. Richard Stern with the Heritage Foundation, thank you so much for your time and your expertise tonight.
Oh, always a pleasure. Thank you.
Next on Faith Nation, the White House refugee decision sparking controversy among some Christians. Welcome back. Well, dozens of white South Africans landed in the U.S. this week, granted refugee status. The Trump administration is facing some pushback as other refugee admissions programs have pretty much been shut down.
Well, on the same day the Afrikaners landed, the Trump administration announced that it's ending protected status for thousands of Afghans, some of whom fought alongside the United States military during the war. Washington correspondent Caitlin Burke has more.
The administration says white South Africans, especially farmers, are being discriminated against, denied job opportunities, and have been subject to violence because of their race.
It's a genocide that's taking place. White farmers are being brutally killed and their land is being confiscated.
Welcome to the United States of America.
On Monday, members of the Trump administration welcomed 49 Afrikaners to the U.S.
We're sending a clear message that the United States really rejects the egregious persecution of people on the basis of race in South Africa.
The South African government strongly disputes claims of discrimination and violence and says allegations of genocide have been widely discredited. Meanwhile, Trump's move has prompted the Episcopal Church to end a decades-long partnership with the U.S. government, helping resettle refugees. The church citing moral opposition to resettling the new arrivals in light of its commitment to racial justice and reconciliation and its ties to the church in South Africa.
It also saddens us to see that other refugees who are being denied entrance to the United States are people, brave people who've worked alongside of our military.
As the Trump administration launches this new South African refugee program, it's announced the end of protected status for thousands of Afghans in the U.S., saying the conditions in Afghanistan have improved enough for them to return home.
The situation in Afghanistan is completely unstable for a number of different populations that I think Christians care about, namely Christians, religious minorities, and women and girls.
Chelsea Sobolik with World Relief tells CBN News that for Christians especially, going back to Afghanistan would be a death sentence.
Afghanistan's currently under the Taliban rule, and Afghanistan has what's called apostasy laws. So it's illegal actually for someone to convert from being a Muslim to another religion. So we're continuing to urge the administration to offer protection for Afghan Christians who, again, would face violence or worse if they returned home to Afghanistan.
There are more than 14,000 Afghans currently in the U.S. under temporary protected status. According to the Department of Homeland Security, that designation will expire next week. John, Jenna.
All right, thank you, Caitlin. Up next, we'll talk about the executive order President Trump just signed, aiming to lower the price of prescription drugs. Will it work, and what does it mean for you? We discuss right after the break.
A new executive order sets a 30-day deadline for drug makers to lower prescription drug prices.
That's right. If they don't comply, they'll have to face new limits over what the government will pay through Medicare. President Trump signed the order Monday, saying he wants the U.S. to stop paying significantly more than other countries. HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. will be brokering the new prices. Drug makers argue if it results in lower profits, that is, that will impact the research they can do to develop new drugs.
Dr. Jerome Adams, former Surgeon General and current Health Equity Director at Purdue, joins us now. Dr. Adams, welcome. Nice to see you. So given your great expertise, what's your reaction to this executive order?
Well, the recent executive order aims to significantly reduce U.S. drug prices by aligning them with the lowest prices paid for by other developed nations. This is the policy you referred to known as most favored nation pricing. It addresses the long-standing issue that Americans often pay 3 times as much for prescription medications than patients in countries that have government-negotiated pricing, something else you also alluded to. These high drug prices have serious consequences for patients, something that we study at Purdue University, where I am all the time. Nearly a third of Americans report not taking their medication as prescribed due to cost, and this results in worse health outcomes and increased health care costs. So the most favored nation policy seeks to level the playing field by ensuring U.S. drug prices don't exceed those in other high-income countries.
You talked about those government-negotiated prices, but can you drill down a little bit more and explain why the United States pays, as you were just saying, sometimes 3 times as much on prescription drugs than other countries?
Well, it's complex. The United States, being largely market-driven, contributes to higher prices. So basically, the pharmaceutical companies set the price. Additionally, intermediaries like pharmacy benefit managers, or PBMs, and you may have heard President Trump mention this, during the release yesterday of his proposal. The PBMs play a significant role in the pricing structure, often leading to a lack of transparency and further complicating efforts to reduce costs. So the most favored nation policy, it does represent a bold step towards addressing high drug prices, but its success is ultimately going to depend on the implementation and balancing the need for affordability with the preservation of incentives for pharmaceutical innovation.
Yeah, we know that's one of the big sticking points for critics is that if these pharmaceutical companies, they won't have as much money for research. Can you talk about that? And do you think that's a concern?
Well, it is true that the United States in many ways subsidizes innovation for the rest of the world. That said, this is a debate that we're going to have to see play out. Many people argue that the profits that pharmaceutical companies make and PBMs make, again, this being a market-based system, are so great that we certainly could squeeze that down some and still be able to have the same level of innovation. That said, again, the pharmaceutical companies may choose to say, well, we're just going to not invest as much in research and development, and we're going to maintain our profits for our shareholders. So again, it's a complex interplay. We'll have to see how it plays out. I do like President Trump raising this issue up as one that is important to all Americans and to access to affordable medications.
All right.
And I do also like the fact that he gave the pharmaceutical companies an opportunity to respond before giving top-down mandates.
All right, Dr. Jerome Adams, we always appreciate the time that you spend with us. Thanks for joining us today.
Hey, thank you.
And still ahead, a special moment for a mother-son duo. Next on Faith Nation. And finally tonight, a memorable Mother's Day, that's for sure, for this family of graduates.
Brandy and Kyle Fields, a mother and son duo, graduated together last weekend from Texas Christian University. The pair wore matching purple sneakers and walked across the stage, the same stage that is, at the school's first commencement ceremony exclusively for graduate students. At 50 years old, Brandy completed her executive MBA, saying she hopes to inspire other mothers to invest in themselves no matter their age. What a great message.
That's beautiful.
A great looking pair.
Yeah, no kidding. They're in Fort Worth, I believe, Texas.
Well, thanks for watching.
All right, have a great evening. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I think there's